Throughout human history, power has often come with cruelty. Some rulers are remembered for building great empires and shaping civilizations, but others are remembered for the unimaginable suffering they caused. These leaders ruled through fear, violence, and brutality, leaving behind legacies stained with blood. Their actions changed the course of history, but they also remind us of the dark side of human ambition and absolute power. One of the most infamous brutal leaders in history was Genghis Khan. Born as Temujin around 1162 in the harsh steppes of Mongolia, he rose from a difficult childhood to become the founder of the Mongol Empire. Genghis Khan was a brilliant military strategist, but his campaigns were also extremely ruthless. As he united the Mongol tribes and expanded his empire across Asia and Europe, entire cities were destroyed. Historians estimate that millions of people died during his conquests. When a city resisted Mongol rule, Genghis Khan often ordered mass executions as a warning to others. Some historical accounts describe entire populations being wiped out. Yet despite his brutality, he also created one of the largest empires in history and introduced systems that improved trade and communication across vast territories. Another leader whose name became synonymous with terror was Adolf Hitler. Rising to power in Germany in 1933, Hitler became the dictator of Nazi Germany and was responsible for one of the darkest chapters in human history under his rule. The Nazi regime promoted an extreme ideology based on racial superiority. This led to the Holocaust, the systematic murder of 6 million Jews along with millions of others including Romani people, disabled individuals, political opponents, and many more. Hitler's aggressive expansion across Europe also triggered World War II, a global conflict that caused the deaths of more than 70 million people. His leadership was driven by hatred, propaganda, and absolute control, making him one of the most destructive leaders the world has ever seen. Joseph Stalin, the leader of the Soviet Union from the mid-1920s until his death in 1953, was another ruler whose regime caused immense suffering. Stalin ruled through fear and strict authoritarian control. During his rule, millions of people were sent to forced labor camps known as gulags. Political opponents, military officers, intellectuals, and even ordinary citizens were accused of being enemies of the state. Many were imprisoned, tortured, or executed. Stalin's policies also contributed to devastating famines, especially in Ukraine during the early 1930s, where millions of people starved to death. Despite industrializing the Soviet Union and leading it through World War II, his rule remains one of the most brutal periods in modern history. In the 20th century, another leader whose policies led to catastrophic loss of life was Mao Zedong, the founding leader of the People's Republic of China. Mao came to power after a long revolutionary struggle and promised to transform China into a powerful socialist nation. However, some of his policies had devastating consequences. The Great Leap Forward, a campaign aimed at rapidly industrializing the country in the late 1950s, led to one of the worst famines in human history. Poor planning, forced collectivization, and unrealistic production targets resulted in widespread starvation. Historians estimate that tens of millions of people died during this period. Later, during the Cultural Revolution, millions more suffered persecution, imprisonment, and violence as Mao sought to eliminate perceived enemies and reshape Chinese society. Another brutal ruler was Pol Pot, the leader of the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia during the late 1970s. Pol Pot attempted to create a radical agrarian society by forcing people to leave cities and work in rural labor camps. Intellectuals, professionals, teachers, and even people who wore glasses were sometimes targeted as enemies of the revolution. Families were separated, education systems were dismantled, and basic freedoms disappeared. In just 4 years, an estimated 2 million people, nearly a quarter of Cambodia's population, died from execution, starvation, disease, and forced labor. The killing fields of Cambodia remain one of the most horrifying examples of political extremism and cruelty. Another figure often mentioned among the most brutal leaders is Ivan IV of Russia, better known as Ivan the Terrible. He became the first Tsar of Russia in the 16th century. Ivan initially introduced reforms that strengthened the Russian state, but over time he became increasingly paranoid and violent. He created a secret police force known as the Oprichniki, who carried out mass executions and terrorized the population. Entire cities were attacked under his orders. One of the most tragic stories from his reign involves Ivan himself killing his own son during a violent argument. His rule left Russia deeply scarred and marked by fear. In Africa during the 1970s, Idi Amin ruled Uganda with extreme brutality. Amin seized power in a military coup and declared himself president. His rule quickly became known for violence, corruption, and terror, Political opponents, journalists, and civilians were arrested, tortured, and executed. It is estimated that between 100,000 and 500,000 people were killed during his 8-year rule. Amin's unpredictable behavior and harsh policies devastated Uganda's economy and created widespread fear across the country. Another leader whose rule brought immense suffering was Kim Il-sung, the founder of North Korea, after World War II. He established a strict communist regime that has continued through his family dynasty for decades. While his government built a powerful state, it also created one of the most tightly controlled societies in the world. Political dissent was not tolerated, and many people were sent to prison camps where conditions were extremely harsh. The system of strict control and propaganda created a society where freedom of expression and basic rights were severely limited. History also remembers Vlad III of Wallachia, often known as Vlad the Impaler. He ruled during the 15th century and became famous for his extremely cruel methods of punishment. Vlad reportedly executed thousands of enemies and criminals by impalement, a method that involved placing victims on long wooden stakes. His harsh tactics were meant to create fear and maintain control over his territory. Stories of his brutality spread across Europe and later inspired the fictional character Dracula. These leaders came from different countries, cultures, and time periods, but they shared one common trait: the willingness to use extreme violence to maintain power and achieve their goals. In many cases, their rule was built on fear, propaganda, and the elimination of opposition. Some of them believed they were shaping a better future for their nations, while others simply sought absolute control. The study of these brutal leaders is not only about remembering the suffering they caused but also about understanding how such power can emerge. History shows that when authority becomes unchecked and human rights are ignored, the consequences can be devastating. By learning about these dark chapters of history, societies can better recognize the warning signs of tyranny and prevent similar tragedies from happening again. Even today, the stories of these rulers serve as powerful reminders of how leadership can shape the fate of millions. Power can be used to build, inspire, and protect people, but it can also be used to destroy lives on a massive scale. The legacy of history's most brutal leaders reminds us of the importance of accountability, justice, and the protection of human dignity in every society.